Sample problem 1.9 from chapter number 1, Stoichiometry. It says, in an industry, copper metal was prepared by the following reaction. Zinc plus copper sulfate, they combine to produce zinc sulfate plus copper. So if 1.247 grams of copper sulfate, when reacted with excess of the zinc metal, a yield of 0.392 grams of copper metal was obtained, calculate the percentage yield. So now we have to calculate the percentage yield. As you can see that we are given the actual yield, which is 0.392 grams of copper metal, and we are given the mass of copper sulfate. So now from mass of copper sulfate, we have to calculate the percentage yield. So how we are going to proceed? That in the first step, we are going to convert the mass of a given quantity into the moles of given quantity. So mass in this case is the mass of copper sulfate. So we are going to convert the mass of copper sulfate into the moles. So as you can see, mass of copper sulfate, it is given in the question 1.247 grams. Then we are going to calculate the molar mass for copper sulfate. Look at the periodic table for the values. It is 63.5 for copper, sulfur it is 32, and oxygen it is 16 into, as you can see, 4 over here. So we are going to multiply it with 4. The answer is 159.6 grams per mole of the copper sulfate. Now we are going to find out the number of moles of copper sulfate, which is mass by molar mass. Now putting the values, we will get the answer 7.982 into 10 raised to power minus 3 moles of copper sulfate. So now we have calculated the moles. In the second step, what we are going to do is that we are going to convert the moles of a given quantity, that is moles of copper sulfate, into moles of desired quantity. So desired quantity is copper. So we are going to find out the moles of copper from copper sulfate. It can be done by using the equation. So what the equation says, according to equation, you can see that zinc plus copper sulfate combine to form zinc sulfate plus copper. Now we have to calculate this copper value from the copper sulfate value. So we are going to compare the copper sulfate with copper. So whatever the quantity we have to find out, we are going to write it on the right side of the paper. Okay. So while comparing, always mention your unknown quantity or desired quantity on the right side. So now we have to find out the number of moles of copper. It is not copper sulfate, it is the number of moles of copper. So the number of moles of copper equals, how we are going to find out? We are going to calculate it by using this formula, which says that if we have a desired quantity, which is the number of moles of copper in this case, we are going to multiply given quantity. So given quantity is always the copper sulfate moles. So the moles of copper sulfate in this case is 7.982 into 10 raised to power minus 3 moles. So you are going to write this value of the moles over here in the given quantity, and you are going to multiply it with the conversion factor. What conversion factor says is that it is the coefficient of desired quantity. So the desired quantity is copper. So the coefficient of copper, as you can see, it is 1, and it can also be obvious from the equation it is 1. So we are going to multiply it with the coefficient and divide it by the coefficient of the given quantity. So the given quantity is copper sulfate in this case. So the coefficient of copper sulfate is 1 also. So we are going to divide it by 1, and our answer came out to be 7.982 into 10 raised to power minus 3 moles of copper. So now we have obtained the moles of copper. We have completed our second step to convert the moles of a given quantity into moles of desired quantity. Now we are going to move on to our third step, which is about the conversion of moles of a given quantity into the mass of desired quantity. Okay. So what it says, look at here, the mass of moles of desired quantity is converted into mass of desired quantity. So how we are going to convert the moles of a copper into the mass of copper? We are going to calculate the atomic mass for copper, which is 63.5 grams per mole. It is obtained from periodic table. Number of moles, as we have calculated on the previous page, it is 7.982 into 10 raised to power minus 3 moles. Now we are going to calculate the mass of copper by multiplying the number of moles of copper by its atomic mass. So by multiplying the number of moles by its atomic mass, we will get the value 0.5072 grams of copper. So what this value is basically our theoretical yield. So this is our theoretical yield, and actual yield was the value which was given in the question. So the question statement already told us the value of copper, which is 0.392 grams of copper. So now we have both of these values. We are going to apply the formula for percentage yield. This formula says actual yield divided by theoretical yield into 100. You have to remember this formula. So the actual yield is 0.392 divided by theoretical yield 0.5072 into 100. So we will get the answer 77.3%. You have to mention this percent over here. It is very important as you are going to calculate the percentage yield. So this is our desired answer for the question.